Hey everybody, this is Ron Coggin with the What's Your Story podcast, a podcast that focuses on generative AI and how we use AI in the work world today, as well as marketing and also in education of all places. So join us each week. This is now our fourth season, and we're going to be coming at you every week with different guests, like last year, guests from the marketing world, guests from the agencies, from places like Google, as well as from people who are experts in things like sponsorship. So join us each week for the What's Your Story podcast. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Spotify and iTunes. Make sure you like the podcast, download the podcast. That'd be really helpful for us. We're trying to get up to 10,000 people. Anyway, looking forward to seeing y'all and looking forward to discussion and your comments about this awesome podcast, which everyone seems to be fascinated with. Have a great day. Bye for now. Welcome, everybody, to the What's Your Story podcast. You know what? This is the fourth season now. Can't believe it. And the second season that we're actually talking about a very interesting topic called generative AI. You know, if you're on Spotify or YouTube or even iTunes, please subscribe, like, share this podcast with everybody. We really want to get it going. And we're growing our numbers, so it's awesome. We're over almost 4,000 on YouTube. We're trying to get up to 5,000 to 10,000 people. So any help you can give us is really great. Now, to start us off in the fourth season, we have a very exciting guest, the AVP of Learning and Technology at George Brown College. She's actually been working with me, and she worked with me at Humber beforehand. So Heidi Marsh, welcome. Welcome to our podcast today.
Thanks so much, Ron. Really happy to be here.
Now, listen, why don't, before we get started, you tell us a little bit about your background, why you spoke to our whole school about AI recently. And I was like, that's why I invited you here, to be honest. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in this, and we'll just go from there.
Sure. Yeah. So I have a funny career story, a funny career pathway. Originally, my background is in cognitive psychology, focusing on metacognition and learning theories. My PhD was actually with primates. So I did my dissertation at the Toronto Zoo with orangutans.
Wow. I
and
didn't know that.
their information gathering abilities. Yeah. So not your typical background, maybe.
Oh.
Then I graduated from my PhD and I became a professor, a psychology professor. So I worked at a couple of different universities. I was down at Bucknell University in the States for a short time, and eventually found my way into the college system at Humber College 2015, and I became the director of scholarship of teaching and learning at that time. So that was all about helping faculty innovate, think about their practices, thinking about maybe a problem that they've been trying to navigate with their students, and then doing some research to sort of try something different, see what the impact is, and go from there. So I was the director of SOTL for about 6 years, and then I moved over to George Brown during the pandemic, actually 2021, became the director of faculty. I had a very long title, Faculty Professional Development and Educational Technologies, I think. And then most recently in the last year have become the AVP of Teaching and Learning.
Very cool. Yeah. So I'm a new faculty member at George Brown, and I met you through that process of a new faculty training that we had, the Academy. And it was a great way to meet people, to meet like-minded people, new professors. And the training was great because it really grounded us to the culture of George Brown, which has been really refreshing for me. So
yeah, I mean, the best part about that program, I think, of course, it is, a chance for faculty to have some actual time and space to really reflect on their teaching and think about sort of what does the evidence tell us about how to make an effective learning experience. But the best part to me of that program is the connections, the networks that you make with colleagues from across the institution. And, I hope for you, Ron, you'll have, 5 years down the road, you'll go to a president's breakfast or an awards ceremony, and you'll see somebody from across the college, maybe from construction, engineering, technology that you haven't seen in a while, and you say, hey, we were in the new faculty academy together. So those relationships hopefully last a lifetime while you're at the college.
Yeah. So what excites you about working for the TLX, the Teaching and Learning Exchange at George Brown? Why is this important to you, and what do you see coming up in the future?
So George Brown, especially I'd say within the last five years or so, we really are leaning in to an evidence, a priority on teaching excellence, teaching innovation, and really trying to make teaching and learning and the experiences that our students get in the classrooms our differentiators. So it's not just at the TLX. Our job, we think of ourselves as sort of a one-stop shop for faculty, whether they are brand new, whether they've been teaching for decades, whether they're full-time, whether they're contract. The goal is to try to be sort of Barnum and Bailey. There's something for everybody here. And it's not just about the sort of just-in-time support and training, but it's also about ongoing sort of pushing the boundaries of your teaching identity. Where do you want to sort of go next with your professional learning energy? Where do you want to push the boundaries in terms of sort of innovation and exploring and experimenting maybe within the classroom and within your practice? And while we're well known for things like our conference and our workshops, I think one of the most important functions that we serve to the community, and this goes back to what I was just saying about the New Faculty Academy, is actually, it's not about the TLX having all the answers or all the ideas. It's about creating space for connection and conversation among faculty. So how can we connect faculty in different and interesting ways so that they can talk about their practices together? Those are usually my most exciting parts of my job, is listening to faculty talk to one another about their teaching. And so we're at a really interesting, exciting time, I think, right now, because we've got a lot of supports. We've got a lot of pieces in place to really help empower faculty to take their teaching to the next level, regardless of where they are within their careers, and really starting to lean in and create the conditions for innovation. So funding for faculty to engage in some teaching innovation projects and study their impact on that. And so, yeah, I think when I first got to the college 4 years ago, I said, a year from now, I think we're going to be in a really good spot. A year from now, and we are there. We've got all the people in
Awesome.
place. We've got all the resources in place. So I think despite some of the challenges that are going on in higher education in general, our focus and our goal is really to empower every faculty member at the college to really lean in. I would say my goal, so if we think about sort of student recruitment, it's obvious
Yeah.
you want to be the college of choice. My goal is for George Brown to be the teaching institution of choice. So I want other professors in the sector to be like, I want to be at George Brown. I want to teach there.
Well, I got to tell you, I moved over from Humber. I was there like you, and I was there for just over 10 years.
Yeah.
And it was refreshing, the cultural change. Not that Humber's a bad place to
Yeah, I was
work.
going to say, no offense to Humber. Humber's also an amazing
No, not
institution.
at all. But it was more, for me, it was more inclusive with the upper management. So we had interaction. Maybe that's because I was part of the New Faculty Academy. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been a refreshing change for me, and it also energized me to be innovative once again with this podcast, for example.
Well,
Now,
and sorry, can
that's
I
so,
say one thing on that? And I
yeah.
think that is too, we're really fortunate right now to have senior leadership and our vice president academic in particular, who comes from a background of faculty development and teaching and learning. So really understands the impact and the importance of our faculty as really the change makers, the levers of the institution, who are with our students every single day in the classroom. And
Mhm.
so it helps to have a leader that really can advocate on our behalf as well.
Absolutely. Now, there's this thing happening in school, especially in the college level, something called AI,
What?
generative
What are you
AI.
talking about?
Yeah, that's why we're here today,
Yeah.
actually. And I'm kind of curious a little bit how there's been some apprehension from faculty. I've noticed it,
Yep.
yet I've embraced it. I'm actually doing, as you're aware, because you have to approve it, but a study on the, learning AI as a learning tool in the classroom. So, what I'm kind of curious, maybe you can let us all know what kind of apprehension we're seeing from faculty members with ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot. What's your perspective on this?
Yeah. So, education is one of those fields where the world will continue to evolve, our learners continue to evolve, technology continues to evolve. So, every couple of years there are major disruptors. So, think about when the internet first came into being and suddenly students could Google information, and when they have YouTube so they can look at a video to learn how to do something, and suddenly it can feel a little bit like an existential threat, right? Like if students have access to information anywhere at any time, what are we here for as an educational institution? But of course, really, once you sort of get past that sort of initial apprehension, you start to see the ways that actually you can use that as a tool to level up, right? And I've heard the animation industry think about this with CGI technology when it came along, that originally it felt very threatening to animators, but then they've learned to really embrace that and take their animation to the next level. So, these trends, these fads, or these technological disruptors come along regularly. Also, I remember MOOCs, massive online open
Mm-hmm.
courses came around maybe 15 years ago. And again, it was like, whoa, what is this going to mean for us? I will say generative AI has disrupted and will continue to disrupt higher ed, but also society, industry in general hereafter. I don't see that it's going to go away anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
And so once again, it does fundamentally cause us to pause and think about what is our value add here? What is our role for our students? And both in terms of how we're helping them to learn and assessing their learning, but also how we're preparing them to enter the world that they're going to be entering in a year's time or 6 months time. So, there is a lot of apprehension. I hear very commonly faculty are struggling with students using generative AI to complete their assessments in ways that maybe they haven't been asked to do. Let's put it that way. So, using generative AI to write essays or to generate content of some other sort. And I think there are some real challenges there, and we can get into that a little bit further in terms of what that means for our approaches. But I think like where I feel concern is a lot of faculty are spending a lot of time and energy trying to detect and how can
Catch people.
I tell if it was used or how can I prove it? I know they must have used it, but how do I prove it so that I can follow up with some disciplinary measures? And I just think that while I understand the logic of that, it's a bit of a losing enterprise because we know that AI detection tools have been shown repeatedly to be unreliable. So I think it's really, there is an opportunity and a need for us to spend some time and energy thinking about this, but I would rather that we're not spending our energy on the policing or the shutting down, but on thinking about what are the ways that we can actually leverage generative AI to support our students in their learning and in their career preparation.
Yeah, interestingly enough, that's kind of how I was thinking about it until you guys put together this conference called Evolve. And then there was an amazing professor from the University of Calgary. I can't recall her name, Patricia. I can't remember her name right now, but I'll find out.
Oh, Brenda McDermott. Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Patricia, I don't know. But anyway, but the reality is that she opened my eyes a little bit in embracing it. And that made me kind of switch in terms of my perspective. And so, for example, I am using it in the classroom. I'm doing a study on it to see the engagement level and maybe how to use it better and satisfaction level. And as an example, I had a quiz in my marketing and social media class just yesterday, and it's an open book quiz.
Yep.
So I said, okay, guys, we have an open book quiz. These are the rules. You can use AI because it's open book. You can do whatever you want. You just can't use your mobile device because you can text other people. I don't want you talking to anybody or getting answers from anybody. That's the one rule. The rest is open book. You can anything you want. And they're like, what? So, we can. So,
right.
But anyway, it was I think they like that. Anyway,
well, listen, this is if students are using generative AI to complete their assessments, they're being resourceful. I mean, of course, we want to value and prioritize academic integrity and being ethical in your work. And if students have been asked specifically not to use generative AI, then it's problematic if they are. But the fact of the matter is they are going to graduate into a world where that is going to be a tool at their disposal when they're in industry. And not only one that they can use, but I'm going to guess in most cases, one that they're going to be expected to be able to use, right? So helping them to learn how to use those tools effectively, ethically, with a critical eye, I think we're doing our students a disservice if we don't try and approach it from that perspective. I do want to put a small caveat in here, and that is to say, there are instances where we need to make sure students aren't using generative AI because they have some fundamental skills they need to learn, right? So in some courses, we may have a learning outcome that says, students need to know and understand this theory of fill in the blank, right? Or they need to know the basic principles of what makes a good, let's say, business pitch, right? So, but that's a knowledge base they have to have. It doesn't say they have to be able to write or describe verbally what that means, right? So in those cases, the learning outcome is only that they need to know it. So you can find other ways of eliciting that information from students. So rather than having them write an essay about that, you could have them have generative AI write an essay and then have them critique or say, yeah, I agree with this, but they miss out on this, or this is, they're oversimplifying this piece, right? And you could have them do that either in written form. You could have them actually physically annotate that with a marker, so you know it hasn't been done by a computer. You could have them make a video talking through those pieces, or an audio recording. So there are lots of ways that we can find space for students to use generative AI, sure, but then still show how they're applying a critical lens to those pieces of information. So the caveat there is there are courses at the college that are about communication, basic communication skills. So if you're in an English class, you probably need to know how to write a paragraph, for example.
I hope
In
so.
those cases, I get it. And I think
Yeah.
we do need to think about really how do we focus on making students' working process visible. So whether that is going back 100 years and having them come into a classroom with pen and paper to actually write it out, to show their writing skills, then that may be the case. But I think those are going to tend to be the exception and not the rule. So,
That is interesting because some teachers our professors are just going back to manual paper tests.
mhm.
I don't actually think that's the answer. I think you're right on. I think, you know, for example, I evaluate by them using tools in a marketing perspective. So there's some great tools that you can create video ads and different ads out
Yep.
there, like Canva and different ones. And then I have them create ads and use it in the context of a campaign.
Yep.
And then I ask them to reflect on what they learned. Now, what they learn is what they're supposed to learn, which is you can't just create something and use it. You have to adjust it.
Yep.
You have to use the tool. And I think that's the key learning for them, that one, they learn how to use a tool, but also that they know that it's not perfect yet. It might be eventually, but not yet. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if we think about Bloom's taxonomy, right, and thinking about the levels of learning that we're asking our students to do, this actually can afford us to give students the opportunity to go a little bit deeper, right, than they might have otherwise cognitively, and get past that sort of superficial levels of learning. And so, yeah, I could imagine listen, I'm not from a business background, but let's say there's a course where you're having to design logos, whether that's graphic design or marketing, whatever. So you can have generative AI generate 5 different logos, and then have the students sort of rate and rank and compare each of them and show how this demonstrates good principles of design in this logo versus this one, right? So it is about getting them, rather than to create maybe, but to curate, to critique, to synthesize. So there are opportunities to go a little bit deeper maybe than we might have otherwise done. And again, to your point, that's what they're going to have to do when they go into industry, right? So, or they will be able to do that. So.
Yesterday I was watching Your Morning, which is on CTV, and they had an interview about generative AI and in the workplace. And one of the things they were talking about was the skill set employers are going to be looking for are going to be able to, are you proficient in this tool?
Yep.
So it's really important. Now, when you're thinking about different tools in education, can you maybe enlighten us some tools that professors are using, or ones you know of that help them?
Yeah. So yeah, I've heard quite a bit in the last 2 years that GPT is like the Kleenex of generative AI, meaning people sort of think as soon as they hear generative AI that they're thinking immediately of ChatGPT. And of course, yes, that was one of the earliest ones most people had experience with. And yes, it does do text generation. Even with that one, I think people are sometimes limited in thinking about the affordances that has, because it isn't just about writing an email or writing an essay. You could use it to brainstorm ideas. You could give it sort of some ideas like what would happen if you mix this in this context, what might happen? Give me 10 ideas of what that could lead to, right? So sort of brainstorming ideas. You can help it to set up workflows for you, study plans. Students could be using it to map out their plans for studying for a semester. So even just within a text generation tool, I think people are sometimes not fully aware of some of the opportunities. Of course, there are tools that generate graphics, as you said, videos, and slideshows. There's lots of pieces like that. There are some other ones that people may not be aware about, like there's one, this better not be an existential threat for you, Ron, but there's one that will make, I think it's Notebook LM through Google, will make a podcast. So
I know.
we had just finished up the work of the Academic Integrity Task Force last spring. We generated an 84-page document And one of the deans turned it into a 12-minute podcast. So we could all listen to a 12-minute podcast about the academic integrity report rather than having to read 84 pages.
I'm going to
Of
hang up
course,
my
I know
cleats,
it's
I
coming
think.
for you. And then there are really simple, fun, kind of silly things. I found one, there's a faculty member in business, Danny Smith, who's using a lot of generative AI tools. And he
Yeah,
showed me
we've had
one
Danny
where,
on, actually. We had him
okay,
last
excellent. Yeah.
season. Yeah, yeah.
So he showed me one where basically I was at Boston Pizza. My kids love Boston Pizza. And my daughter was, had the kids menu, and she drew a little caricature of I don't know what it was, some kind of animal. And Danny showed me this tool where you could take a picture of it and upload it into this AI system, and it made the character dance and jump and doing all these different animations. So it really is quite astounding. There are tools that can generate a website within like 30 seconds, honestly.
Yeah,
And
those aren't great though, but
they're still coming along.
yeah,
But the fact
yeah.
of the matter is, it can give you a rough draft, a first draft. It
Mhm.
might just give you some ideas. Oh, I didn't think about, maybe we should have a web form for giving suggestions. Or so sometimes it's just about maybe it's showing you things you don't want your website to look like, or, some ideas that you might. So, yeah, I think as much as anything, it's great for sort of helping you. Lots of things are hard to do from just a blank slate, or like I'm a writer and I love writing, and starting from a blank page can sometimes feel really intimidating, right? So to
Writer's
have
block,
something
yeah.
that can give you some sort of generation of ideas and thoughts, and something to stimulate your creativity, can be really helpful.
Yeah, so I had a guest on. Her name's Siren Koka. She originally worked for Google, then she went out to Asia, where she worked there for Google. Now Google sponsored her to get her master's degree in behavioral science relating to AI.
Yep.
Okay, so
Yeah.
having her back on because she's in the Harvard labs. She's gotten a project approved related to AI and behavioral science.
Amazing.
So I'm gonna.
Yeah.
One of the things she did, which we won't go much into here, is she works with the UN as well
Mhm.
on creating AI tools to help assist people with what you call it, ultrasound for
Mhm.
women who are pregnant. So they bring these machines into third world countries where people don't have the skills, and the AI assists them in how to use them and everything else. And she was a big advocate of it and got it approved at the UN level and got it deployed that way. I was like, wow, you're
Amazing.
on my podcast. But anyway, so
Yeah. There are a
so
lot of
yeah.
the potential tools in medicine. I know in terms of detection of, I think, like doing diagnoses of different like medical images and that kind of thing. I know also in like biochemistry and the creation and looking at different drugs, there's a big opportunity for doing just a lot of sort of
Mhm.
hypothetical testing without having to have the physical materials to understand, if I blend this element with this element, then what? So yeah, all kinds of things that I think many of us haven't even begun to wrap our heads around the possibilities out there.
Now, what do you think, in terms of your perspective and where you sit at the college, you see some of the biggest challenges or pitfalls associated with generative AI in education?
Yeah,
And
great
how can we
question.
solve this, I guess?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things, and the first one we've alluded to a little bit is that piece around academic integrity, and
Mhm.
when it is appropriate or not appropriate for students to use generative AI. As you know, hopefully, our stance has been to ask all faculty. We are not mandating that faculty must use it. We are not saying they cannot use it. But all we're asking is for faculty to communicate clearly with their students what is allowed. So it might be the case where you have a course where you say, listen, this is not a tool you're going to be using in this course. I expect that you will not use it to create any of your assessments. You may have a course where you say you can use it wherever you want, however you want. You just need to be clear, and you need to make sure that you acknowledge when you've used and how you've used
Mhm.
generative AI. Or there may be something somewhere in between the two where you say, you know what, for this assessment, I really want you to explore and try out AI, and for these ones over here, this, you're not allowed to use it there. So the main thing is, we trust our faculty. We know our faculty are our greatest asset at the college. So we trust folks to know what makes the most sense within their context and with their learners. But it is about being explicit and transparent with students about expectations. So that said, I think I've spoken already a little bit about my thoughts in terms of trying to police and detect it versus, thinking about alternative approaches to assessment instead. So thinking about whether we can find more authentic ways of assessing our students' learning. And we've given a couple of examples of that today, how you could sort of leverage and
Mhm.
integrate generative AI, and to give students an opportunity to maybe do some higher level thinking or cognitive activity with their course content. So academic integrity, no question, is one big piece.
Mm-hmm.
Another piece is around ethics, and sort of that ties to academic integrity, but it also, there are some real risks here associated with bias and thinking about the ways that these large language models may unintentionally continue to propagate biases that exist. So remember that the way that these tools work is they just take information and synthesize it from everywhere in the world and online and all these digital resources. So if there are already pieces out there that are biased, or there are prejudices, or there are unintended consequences happening, then these tools are only going to propagate that further. They're going to amplify that further. So that's another really, really important piece that we need to consider. And I think not only consider it for ourselves in our work, but also talk about that explicitly with our students, show explicitly with our students. So with our keynote address this past year at the conference, there was an example where depending on the prompts that you gave, if you said, show me an image of, a group of Canadians at a Toronto Maple Leafs game, and then they'll show a picture of a crowd, and you might see a sea of white faces and maybe men and maybe middle-aged to late age, right? So like, that's not what the city of Toronto looks like. And so there are certain assumptions that have been used to build into that model. So I think it's really important for us to talk about those things with our students to help them to really critically analyze the outputs of these tools. And I think just helping them understand or take a critical look in general to the outputs of these tools. So if we've talked about how generative AI may be used to write a paragraph for a student, but if a student doesn't have those fundamental skills to know what a well-constructed paragraph looks like, they won't recognize that what they've been given isn't of good quality. So really helping them to be critical around the outputs of these tools. And the last piece, of course, is the environmental impact of these tools. And that's
That's
something
a
that
really interesting one. That's come to light recently in the news,
Yes. So of course, these tools have a massive, massive carbon footprint as a result of the energy that's required to run these tools across the world. And so, in equal parts, while we want to be an institution that is focused on innovation and preparing our students for the future, we also, sustainability is a really important value to us as an institution. We want to be responsible global citizens. And so I think that this is something that I still have my own learning to do in terms of what that means, what kinds of things I can do to offset my own use of generative AI tools. But so far in my experience, I feel like it's something that sort of people are raising and questioning and talking about, but still sort of trying to understand what is actually happening in terms of the doing. What are we actually doing to offset and make sure that we're being responsible in the extent that we're using it, and in other ways that we might offset the impact of it environmentally.
Yeah, very true. Now, is George Brown piloting any projects or programs related to generative AI in education?
So we
I don't
are
know about
on
this, so I
the
want to
very,
know.
very, very, very cusp of just about to have a big announcement, actually. And I'm not allowed, I can't spoil it
Oh,
here. I
come
can't tell you.
on.
I know, I wish.
Well, maybe we
Um,
can have you back on and you can talk about it when it's public.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
It is coming. It should be coming out in the next week, I believe. Very big, very exciting announcement.
Okay.
And I will say also, because we've just launched our Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, the SOTL Sparks grant program, that is meant to give faculty who want to innovate or pilot any new idea in their teaching a little bit of funding and time and support to do some research around the impact of it. And so that's open-ended to anything. It doesn't have to be just generative AI. But as it happens, we just got 19 grant applications in our first round, and a good handful, I can't remember exactly how many of them, but a very substantial proportion of those are focused on generative AI in some way. So its relationship to accessibility, its opportunities for inclusion, et cetera. So definitely something that is sort of at the forefront of our conversations around innovation at the college, no question.
Yeah. And I'm one of those persons, but I didn't ask for a grant, but I'm doing a
Well,
research project.
because you're doing well, and in the new Faculty Academy, a number of the SOTL projects are also focused on generative AI.
Yeah.
So it is really ripe for the exploration, no question.
Very, very cool. So the all these technological changes, it means you have to make sure that your employees are up to speed. And there are some great certifications. I have a few in my marketing class, digital marketing class, which
Mhm.
is at Google's AI Essentials certification. Are there anything like that that George Brown's going to offer, or anything you're partnering with or thinking about partnering with to give the staff and or tools to add into classes to give people those extra skill sets that are
Yeah.
needed in the workplace today?
Great question. So first, stay tuned for the big announcement that's coming. But
Damn.
beyond that,
Okay, let's not do this. Let's come back another day. Okay,
well,
bye.
no, no, but yeah, there are a few other big pieces. So one, as I just said, was the grant that we just launched, but
Yeah.
also this semester specifically, we've just launched a new micro certificate called Critical Approaches to Generative AI in Education. So that's
Okay.
a 15 to 20-hour online course that faculty can take free of charge. You get badges and digital certificate of completion
Okay.
for that. That's been created by Ryan Morrison, who's a faculty member from CPLS. We also have, of course, a number of resources on the TLX website to sort of help faculty understand the affordances of generative AI, to think maybe differently about some approaches to assessment. We also have all of the keynotes. So you and I have referenced two of them today, but from we've actually brought in 6 keynote speakers over the
Yeah.
last 2 years that are experts in this field from around the world. All of their keynote addresses are available as videos on our website. So
Oh, cool.
another opportunity for folks to check out in their spare time. And then I think one other thing that we may not think about as much, but this is a bit of a wicked problem for higher education, period. No matter what discipline you're in, no matter where you are in the world. But we are 2 and a bit years into this conversation, really, as a sector. And so a lot of folks have put a lot of time and energy into it. And luckily, the educational development and teaching and learning world tends to be a very open, sharing community. And so there are a number of websites that exist where faculty have been sort of crowdsourcing their ideas and sharing their ideas about how they've transformed their assessments to incorporate generative AI. So we have a couple of links to some of those on the TLX website as well. But I would really encourage folks to take a look within your disciplinary area, talk to your colleagues at other institutions to sort of see what they're doing, because it is something that it kind of unites us all. It's something that we're all grappling with as a sector.
Very cool. Well, Heidi, I could be talking to you for hours on this subject, but we seem to be running out of time, unfortunately. But I am going to invite you back later in the season,
Yeah,
in this 4th
absolutely.
season,
Yeah,
when
happy to.
everything is public. So,
Yeah.
and when my study is approved. So
Yes. Well, and then I will interview you, and you can tell me about your study.
there you go. There you go. We could do it in the new lab at
Yes.
George Brown
Yes.
College.
Exactly. Yeah.
So listen, one last thing I want you to think about, and you can leave for the audience, and that is, if you are a student and you are thinking about your career, how should they approach AI, generative AI, in their learning?
Yeah. Great question. So I would say for students or for faculty, anybody who's maybe new or newer to this area and to thinking about it, I think the first thing to do is to really give yourself some time and space to play around and explore and actually try out the tools. And I've been doing this with the deans and the associate deans, giving them 30-minute challenges to use these 5 tools and accomplish these 5 things.
I would have liked to have seen that, actually.
Listen, it's because if you haven't actually tried them, I think it
Yeah.
really is worth it to see what's actually out there and
Yeah.
what's possible. So I would recommend to start there. For students in particular, one thing that we really pride ourselves at George Brown is the amount that students get to be actually directly connected to industry, whether that's through their work integrated learning, whether that's through placements, whether that's through guest speakers, whether that's their faculty. Of course, a number of our faculty, most of our faculty are current industry experts. Talk to them, because a lot of industries are also still figuring this out for themselves. They kind of know that it's here. Some are leaning in and embracing it more than others, but we all know that it's going to continue to come. So I would take the time to really talk to people who are active in industry and understand where things are at currently and what skills they expect they might need in a couple of years. I think one of the things that I've read and thought a lot about is, like many things, this is also like computer language coding, where every 6 months there's a new language to learn. It's not necessarily learning one specific language or one specific tool. It's that sort of literacy around how do you generate helpful or useful or effective prompts? How do you adopt when you're exploring a new
Oh, yeah,
technology? How do
absolutely.
you do
Yeah.
that? Right. So focus less on the specific tool and more about sort of how the tools are used, how you use them critically, how you use them ethically, etc.
I think that'd be very helpful. Actually, helpful even for me in my class with I mean, I do a basic introduction and have them create stuff, but
Yeah.
the reflection, as I said, is about the learning and what they need to do and use different prompts and different things. And that's absolutely true. Before we go away today and leave the podcast, I did do a podcast with generative AI.
Oh, yeah.
So I created a character in character.ai. Her name is Angelica
Mm-hmm.
because they named her that because they thought that was a good name for someone. She's an avatar and she speaks. And I had a complete podcast asking her role. She's an expert in AI. That's what I made her.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely scary. I share it with some people and they're like, what? I couldn't
Yeah.
believe it. So
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you have a chance, watch that because it is a little scary. And also try character.ai.
Mm-hmm.
You can have your own little assistant. You can have Donald Trump is your friend if you want on there.
Oh,
So
yes, I've seen this tool. Yeah, where you can have full conversations with different
yeah,
famous folks. Yep, that's right. Yep, I have
very
seen that
cool.
one. Yeah,
So
yeah.
listen, once again, thank you. I'll be seeing you on campus. I'm going to invite you back for sure when we have those new announcements. I'm looking forward to hearing what those are. And then also everybody out there, this is the What's Your Story podcast. Once again, we've had a great guest with Heidi Marsh from George Brown College. And, we want you to share this podcast, like the podcast, subscribe. All the help we can get is really appreciated. So everybody, you have a great day. And thank you once again for joining us, Heidi.
Thanks, Ron. Take care.